Hello, namaskar, adab. Welcome back to my channel again. आप सब ख़वातीनो हज़रातों का मेरे चैनल में एक बार फिर इस्तकबाल करता हूँ. Um, we will continue with Sahir Ludhianvi again, and I have a very interesting nazm for you here. एक बहुत दिलचस्प नज़म पेश करने आया हूँ आपके समक्ष में आज. और इस नज़म की प्रसंग और व्याख्या का आगाज करने से पहले तारीख की थोड़ी गुफ्तगू हो जाए, उर्दू के तारीख की थोड़ी गुफ्तगू हो जाए. बिफोर वी स्टार्ट विद द discussion and reading of this poem, let us talk a little bit about the history of Urdu, because the history of Urdu, the identity of the language, the identity imposed on the language, एक जुबान की अपनी एक हस्ती होती है, लेकिन जो सियासी मुकामीर होते हैं, जो 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 इंसान को, जो इंसानियत की तकसीम करते हैं ज़बान के बुनियाद पे या मजहब के बुनियाद पे या दीन धर्म के बुनियाद पे, उससे काफ़ी सारी पहलुओं में, सामाजिक पहलुओं में उसका असर पड़ता है और दूर दूर तक का असर पड़ता है. As every language has an identity, sometimes an identity can be imposed on a language. And this leads to a lot of downstream effects in society, right? So Urdu is one of those languages that has suffered under this imposition of identity in a tug of war, and I'll tell you why. The origin of Urdu is very interesting. Urdu or Urdu in Turkish or Turkic languages, be it Turkish, Osmani, be it Chagatai, the language that Babur, for example, spoke, all these in Central Asian Turkic languages, Urdu means camp, and specifically it refers to a military camp, right? And the reason why this language is called Urdu is because the hypothesis with the most evidence is that it evolved from Khadi Boli, the dialect spoken in Western UP and the Delhi region, in the camps of the armies of the Mughal Empire and their subhas. It mixed with multiple different languages. It borrows from a variety of languages. It borrows from Italian, it borrows from Portuguese, it borrows from Sanskrit, it borrows from English, it borrows from Japanese, it borrows from Chinese, as in Mandarin. It borrows from a it borrows from French, it borrows from a wide gamut of languages, but the syntax is still of what we know as Khadi Boli or Hindi. Hindi is a later term, by the way. Khadi Boli was what it used to be known as, and it has a history going back to the great Amir Khusro of the 13th century Delhi Sultanate times, who basically brought nazms, the type of poetry which incorporates Persian poetry, which incorporates nazms, ghazals, shairs, and some of the meters that they use into the Indian subcontinent. He invented the concept of the tarana in Hindustani classical music, where you sing beats of the you sing the surs of the ragas, which then in Carnatic music got corrupted to Tillana, which is the same concept. He invented the concept of the khayal in Hindustani music. He invented the qawwali. He wrote books on philosophy. He wrote books on history. He did translations. He was proficient in Arabic. He was proficient in Farsi. He was proficient in Braj Bhasha. He was proficient Braj Bhasha, which is spoken around Mathura and those regions. And he was proficient in Sanskrit. The man was a polymath, a legend and a giant of his time. So the lineage of Urdu starts from there. At some point, Urdu became more refined. नुक्ते शामिल हुए थे उर्दू में. वो उर्दू के नुक्तों का स्टैंडर्डाइजेशन होना शुरू हुआ in Awadh, Awadh as it used to be known. And even today, the most pure form of Urdu, the Khalis Urdu, what we call, is spoken in Awadh. Not in Pakistan, because that has been very strongly Arabized, and we will get to that. So what happened was, Urdu became or Hindustani became slowly the language of the common man in this region. And everyone could understand Urdu at that time. That's what they basically spoke, or Hindustani is what it is called, right? When social consciousness of a Hindu identity and a Muslim identity, a Hindu nation and a Muslim nation, started gaining track, spearheaded by, unfortunately, at that time, the Aligarh Muslim University, whose origins never lay in this distinction at all, in fact. And the group of freedom fighters like Bal Gangadhar Tilak in Maharashtra, and some Hindi poets at that time who wanted to ascribe a Hindu identity to this language and Sanskritize it vis-a-vis the actual Urdu that was traditionally spoken. And there are reasons for this. So, Bal Gangadhar Tilak was among the few radically Hindu freedom fighters who actually was majorly part of the struggle against the British. He was part of the Indian National Congress. Whereas at that time, and also later in the early 19th century, most of the religious Hindu organizations were not part of the freedom struggle. They were in fact allied with the British, as were most of the Hindu princes at that time and Muslim Nawabs and Nizams of the time, because that was the only way they could survive. So, I mean, one has to look at this in context at the time, how strongly this division started happening. For example, even though Bal Gangadhar Tilak was a respected and a pivotal figure in Indian independence movement, he was strongly against updating the Hindu Marriage Act, which at that time in the late 19th century set the legal marriageable age of Hindu girls at 8 years old. They wanted to raise it to 12, which he fought against. They wanted to make sure that the Hindu daughter would also receive an equal share in the inheritance. He fought against that to preserve what he called Hindu traditions, which are Brahminical traditions. He was very radical in these terms. So naturally, he joined in the efforts to Hinduize the language and turn it into a more Sanskritized form of Hindustani. And this was also the group at that time which officially pushed for the adoption of Devanagari as the script to write Hindi in. Now, a lot of small languages around there were indeed written in either Nandanagari or Devanagari, but the Nastaliq script, the Farsi script, was still the official script in which Hindustani, Hindi, and Urdu were written all over all over that place. And in fact, in the Maratha Empire, Farsi was an official court language along with Marathi, and Marathi was written in both scripts at that time, the Devanagari script and in the Farsi script. So the first translation of the Quran happened into Urdu in 1789. Now, a lot of the hardcore, or let's say more religious, radical Muslim sheikhs, mullahs would not approve of the translation of the Quran into any language for that matter apart from the Arabic, because a particular sect, an influential figure post fall of the Islamic Golden Age in Baghdad and Andalusia, said that in the Hadith, he claimed that Prophet Muhammad said that during the day of judgment, Qiyamah, the angels would speak only in Arabic, and then Muhammad would speak only in Arabic, and all those kind of things. Unfortunately, so when Shah Abdul Qadri in Delhi translated the Quran, it's called a tarjuma, he did the tarjuma of the Quran into Urdu, people came up with a fatwa against him of kufr, of apostasy, saying how can he translate such a pure, pak, muqaddas book, revealed so by the God, whatever, into this such a disgusting base language of the people. When not Ram Prasad Bismil, but there was another poet, Ram Prasad, who, if I remember correctly, wrote Hindi or poetry in Bundeli. He was from Bundelkhand. He was shat on by and he was a Brahmin, and he was shat on by all the priests of that time, saying, how can you use such a base dialect to write devotional poems about Rama and Krishna? You should only use Sanskrit, such that he had to issue an apology, which Shah Abdul Qadri didn't. So you see, this a lot of preservation of text, scripture has led to a lot of dichotomies and discrimination in society, classes reorganizing themselves based on who is the protector and keeper of the knowledge and all these. And it has happened with Urdu, it has happened with multiple of these languages. And that's where now we come to the actual point here, right? Bahadur Shah Zafar, the last Mughal emperor, was a weak emperor militarily. In fact, at that time, the Mughal Empire had shrunk, and its real so-called power was only up in the north. By the time of Zafar, you had the English East India Company establish residencies in all major towns. They had original residents. At that time, the resident of New Delhi was Metcalfe, Sir Metcalfe. This is for my dad, the Metcalfe House in the DRDO Metcalfe House. Yeah, I mean, we know that was the residence of Sir Metcalfe, overlooking the ridge, and then therefore the ramparts of the Red Fort and Old Delhi at that time, you could actually see through, and a lot of cannons were positioned, and there was a battle that happened at the ridge. And so, if you guys are interested in this, you should read The Last Mughal by William Dalrymple. It is, of course, a fictionalized account of real history, but it is decently well referenced. Of course, there are certain exaggerations done for literary license, but all the records of the Kotwalis, of the Qazis, and everyone in Delhi complains, the Baraf Khana is broken, I didn't get ice today, or Today, this guy cheated me in the market when I was selling him, when I was buying some grain from him, because I suspect that the weights that he used were not true. You can read all these records of daily life in the terms of the complaints that were given to the Kotwal, the Qazi, the cases that were adjudicated by the Qazi. So a lot of rich literary. So Delhi was a center of rich literature at that time. And Bahadur Shah Zafar himself was a poet. Do Gaz Zameen Na Mili is what he wrote towards the end of his life, when he was exiled to Rangoon, because he was the leader of the first Jang-e Azadi, the first War of Independence, which the Britishers in England is still taught as the Sepoy Mutiny. Colonizers versus the colonized, right? And so Delhi became this rich center of poetry and culture and art. Mirza Ghalib was originally from Agra, the old capital of the Mughals, which Shah Jahan then moved to Delhi. In fact, and let me be very honest with you. Mirza Ghalib was a man of massive arrogance. He was condescending, he was arrogant, clever, extremely intelligent, insanely intelligent, multilingual, polymath. He was amazing, right? But the guy was crafty like a fox. He wrote these long letters of bootlicking to the Britishers so that he could get pension from them after the War of Independence. Before that, he was sucking up to Bahadur Shah Zafar. He in fact, the story that there was this rivalry between him and Muhammad Ibrahim Zauq. Zauq was the Shair-e-Alam at that time, the court poet, the poet laureate, and the ustad of the teacher of Bahadur Shah Zafar himself. He made an utter fool of him in the mehfil of Bahadur Shah Zafar himself. He was a clever man. I mean, he wrote this about himself. वो पूछते हैं कि गालिब कौन था? अरे कोई बतलाए तो बतलाए क्या? People ask me, who is Ghalib? Really? What? Bolu, even if I say, what should I say? This was his amount of arrogance that this man had, and conviction in his own abilities. I mean, he was seeing all the petty little squabbles around in Delhi, the court and everything. He wrote, बाजी चाहे अतफाल है दुनिया मेरे आगे, होता है शब रोज तमाशा मेरे आगे. This whole world is just children's playground. Every day, every night, I see drama playing out in front of me. So he was quite a character, let's say, and he was very celebrated, such that even though Dakkani has a longer history, longer body of literature than Urdu, it prompted, like, after the rise of Ghalib, it prompted Muhammad Ibrahim Zauq to say, in dino garche Dakkan mein hai bade qadre sukhan. These days, there are a lot of such appreciators of our Urdu in Garche Dakkan, in the country, in the lands of the Deccan. The Nizamat of Hyderabad, Mysore, Sultanates, Northern Karnataka, etc. पर कौन जाए ज़ौक़ दिल्ली की गलियां छोड़कर. So Delhi was still the center of Urdu poetry and art, along with Lucknow. Right, and then what happened was Ghalib died in 1869, the year that Gandhi was born. And slowly and surely, Urdu started getting more and more pushed into being a more Islamic thing, and Hindi being more of a Hindu thing. This is very unfortunate because, yeah, everyone up there, Hindu is being. I mean, people would write shlokas in Nastalic script. People would do tell stories of the Ramayana and the Mahabharata in Urdu in the regions of Punjab. This is how they started putting identities, enforcing identities on a language that came about from a mixture of identities itself, and which is why one of the names of Urdu is Rekhta, mixture. So when this started happening, and then independence happened, right? And when independence happened, there was a big push for Hindi to be declared the national language of India, which Pakistan actually did that already. They said, we are an Islamic republic and our official language is going to be Urdu. It will be taught everywhere, and it doesn't matter whether it is the Punjab, whether it is Sindh, Balochistan, Northwest Frontier Province, as it was known, or today as it is known as Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. People in Balochistan, in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, they don't speak anything close to Urdu, right? They speak Balochi, which is a lot of influence from modern Farsi. A bunch of people speak Brahui in Sindh region, which is actually a Dravidian language, connected more to Kannada, Telugu, and Tamil than any of the Indo-European languages or the Indo-Aryan languages. Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, they speak Pashto, Dari. So this was when Pakistan officially imposed Urdu on its population. Now, in India, however, rich debates about this happened both in the Constituent Assembly that was formed to write the Indian Constitution, which included representatives from all over the 525 princely states at that time and the big provinces at that time, the Madras Presidency, Mysore State, Bengal Presidency, Bombay and Gujarat Presidency, all these different, Punjab, all these different places, right? So at least the different linguistic groups had a say in Indian democracy, in the Indian democratic process. So the compromise was that in Article 343 of our Constitution, if I remember correctly, please correct me if I'm wrong, we assigned the status of Rajbhasha to Hindi and English and not Rashtrabhasha, right? Which is why we have a schedule in the Constitution that distinguishes 22 distinct languages in India, of which Urdu is one of them because of this script. Technically, Hindi and Urdu are absolutely not different languages. They are exactly the same language in just two different registers. So that's what happened. And Hindi went through a deliberate Sanskritization process in India, headed by the luminary Harivansh Rai Bachchan. In Pakistan, what happened was, after the dictator Zia-ul Haq came to power, it went through a standardization which veered off into more Arabic rather than the original Farsi roots of most of the words. So if you listen to some of the Urdu that newscasters in Pakistan, for example, speak, it's really hard to understand if you don't know Arabic, because they use a lot of Arabic words which the Urdu that I speak, or the Urdu of Sahir, or the Urdu of Ghalib, or even Pakistan's own, the Urdu of Faiz and Faraz is not the same. And this is artificial, right? So all this happened, and now we are post-independence in our discourse, in our prasang right now. 1869 was when Ghalib passed away, and 100 years after that was 1969. A lot of things happened in the 60s, right? The Prague Spring happened. They were rising up against free market capitalism in many countries in the West. There were anti-war movements, strong anti-war movements. There were strong movements against CIA and American imperialistic operations in Latin America, in Vietnam. So the world was in upheaval at that time, and India was going through no less. And people who, we discussed Guru Dutt in the last video, people who have watched Hindi cinema of the 50s, people who have watched Hindi cinema of the 60s, what we know as the golden age of Hindi cinema, you will realize that it was a lot more Urdu back then than what we know as pure Hindi. There were, of course, films which were there was a mythological film starting from our first movie, Raja Harishchandra, late into the 60s. Any historical, any Hindi movie, any religious movie, apart from one or two here, were all based on Indian mythology and Indian gods, and they were in Urdu. But this, as I said, this was changing. In spite of that, and given all these economic and social upheavals of the time, and 1967, just before this, was the Suez Crisis, of which the Arab-Israel War, of which Sahir then wrote his magnum opus, Parchaiyan, which we have discussed before. So the Indian government suddenly at that point decided, we should commemorate Ghalib's death centennial. So they released a series of stamps, series of books, and everything. Sahir was watching all this quietly and doing his job. But you cannot keep Sahir Ludhianvi quiet, right? And so he wrote this poem, Jashn-e-Ghalib, that addresses all this half an hour of context history in the prasang that I have given. So now, let us move to the poem that is called, the nazm that is called Jashn-e-Ghalib, the festival of Ghalib. 21 बरस गुजरे आजादी कामिल को, तब जाके कहीं हमको गालिब का ख्याल आया। तुरबत है कहां उसकी, मस्कन था कहां उसका, अब अपने सुखन परवर जहनों में सवाल आया. So this, as you see, it was written in 1968 in anticipation of the next year. 21 बरस हुए आजादी कामिल को, आजादी कामिल जब हमको आज़ादी मुकम्मल हुआ, जब हमें आज़ादी मिली. 21 बरस, 21 years, it's been 21 years since we got independence, तब जाके हमको गालिब का ख्याल आया. Now we start remembering Ghalib again. तुरबत है कहाँ उसकी, where is his grave, where is his mazar? मस्कन था कहाँ उसका, where is his house? Ghalib house in Delhi was in Chandni Chowk, Gali Balli Mara. You should visit it. It's really so badly kept. I mean, you enter through one of the baradaris, and then you get to Gali Balli Mara. There's a small little sign, and it's in such a bad state of upkeep. And it's even, and if you want to go to his grave, his turbat, his mazar, it's really hard to find. So, turbat hai kahan uski, मस्कन था कहां उसका, अब अपने सुखन परवर जहनों में सवाल आया. Now, so-called appreciators, the connoisseurs, सुखन परवर, they're asking, where are these things? 100 साल से जो तुरबत चादर को तरसती थी, अब उस पे अकीदत की फूलों की नुमाइश है. For 100 years, the grave that was waiting for someone to put a chadar, a sheet on it. So this is a Sufi thing. So one thing that we must all understand is that up until the two-nation theory that was propagated in the latter half of the 19th century and then the early 20th century that led to the partition. I completely lost the thread that I was talking about. Anyway, let's get back to. तो तुर्बत है कहाँ उसकी, मस्कन था कहाँ उसका, अपने सुखन परवर जहनों में सवाल आया, 100 साल से जो तुर्बत चादर को तरसती थी. Right, so we are getting to now we get to the point. 100 साल से जो तुर्बत चादर को तरसती थी. So the characteristic of Indian Islam until the two-nation theory started, and both what the collection of different faiths that we call Hinduism and Islam started getting more and more radicalized. The Indian flavor of Islam was Sufism. And Sufism, you have all these Sufi peers, these wise men who have these mazars, their graves, their tombs. Turbat is a tomb where devotees go there to request for something, dua karna, and one of the offerings is a green chadar, a sheet that they put on it, which, if you look at it from a Quranic and Islamic perspective, is really bad. That's almost idol worship, right? But this was the Indian flavor of Islam, Sufism. So that's what he says. He compares Ghalib to one of the peers. 100 साल से जो तुर्बत चादर को तरसती थी, अब उस पे अकीदत के फूलों की नुमाइश है. नुमाइश, presentation. अकीदत, devotion. अब उस पे फूलों की नुमाइश है. That अकीदत के फूलों की नुमाइश है. Now is when, after 100 years, that's when now people have started presenting like flowers to this grave. उर्दू के ताल्लुक से कुछ भेद नहीं खुलता. ये जश्न, ये हंगामा खिदमत है कि साजिश है. But by associating yourself now with Urdu, do you think you're going to start resolving this division, this bhed? ये जश्न, ये हंगामा खिदमत है कि साजिश है. All this stuff that you're doing, this big jashn, this festival, ये hangama, this chaos, this noise, khidmat, is it service or is it a sazish or is it a conspiracy? जिन शहरों में गूंजी थी गालिब की नवा बरसों, उन शहरों में अब उर्दू बेनाम निशान ठहरी. जिन शहरों में गूंजी थी गालिब की नवा, his voice बरसों, for years, in all those cities in which his voice resounded for years, like Delhi. उन शहरों में अब उर्दू बेनाम निशान ठहरी, because Delhi and Allahabad, where Harivansh Rai Bachchan was sitting, were the centers where Sanskritization of Hindi was occurring and the marginalization of Urdu from the public sphere was occurring. Now, this is a nice dichotomy because Urdu, one of the few places in which Urdu was alive was in the Indian film industry, because lyricists were actually poets like Sahir Ludhianvi, Majru Sultanpuri, and all those different, Shailendra, Akbar Allahabadi, and all those different people, right? So he says, जिन शहरों में गूंजी थी गालिब की नवा बरसों, उन शहरों में अब उर्दू बेनाम निशान ठहरी. Now Urdu is benam, without name and signs. They are being deleted, they are being removed. आजादी कामिल का ऐलान हुआ जिस दिन, मातूब जुबान ठहरी, गद्दार जुबान ठहरी. आजादी कामिल का ऐलान हुआ जिस दिन, when our independence was announced and the split happened, since that day, Matub Zuban Tahrir became a cursed language. Gaddar Zuban Tahrir became a traitorous language. जिस अहदे सियासत ने ये जिंदा ज़बां कुचली, उस अहदे सियासत को मरहूम का गम क्यों है? अहदे सियासत, an era of politics, or in this sense one can say अहदे सियासत is like in these times of politicking. जिस अहदे सियासत ने ये जिंदा ज़बां कुचली, this this politicking of these times with the current situation, that politicking which ground this language, this living language into the ground. क्योंकि जब आप, when you see, as I told you, that people of all religions, people of all poets wrote about epics in any religion, epics in wrote about, translated the Ramayana and the Bhagavad Gita and the Mahabharata and the Vedas themselves, Puranas were all translated in Urdu. There used to be pravachans in Urdu, and when you have such a strong language that arose from secular tradition instead of religious traditions, like every other language in the world, whose poetry starts with, praising the forces of nature because those were the gods at that time, and then slowly develops into addressing other issues after people start settling down, class systems form due to some people being literate, scribes, this and this, when people have division of labor, so some people can, spend their time in these artistic pursuits. Right? And so Urdu was the living proof that this two-nation theory was wrong. And which is why they tried so hard on both sides. In Pakistan, the radicals, and in India, surprisingly or enough, if you know enough about our history, you wouldn't be surprised, the Congress governments tried doing this. They were very strongly anti-Hindu, in spite of the fact that Jawaharlal Nehru himself was more than proficient in Urdu. So there were a lot of these political things going on. Instead of the government addressing the rest of the actual social ills in society at that time. See, in spite of the fact that our founding fathers had the foresight to establish very strong democratic principles in our constitution, that did not happen anywhere else in the post-colonial new fledgling nations, from Southeast Asia all the way to the Mediterranean. If you look at Africa, if you look at other nations in Asia, India is the only true functioning democracy. And this is because of our founding fathers, the Constituent Assembly, the debates, the open debates, the critiques that happened. And then when a lot of social ills were not addressed correctly or properly by succeeding governments, like every other government, bread and circus, you want to divert the attention away. And so what Sahir thought was that this was one of those attempts. And therefore it is hypocrisy, right? जिस अहदे सियासत ने ये जिंदा ज़बां कुचली, उस अहदे सियासत को मरहूम का गम क्यों है, मरहूम डेथ। गालिब जिसे कहते हैं उर्दू का ही शायर था, उर्दू पे सितम ढाकर गालिब पे करम क्यों है। The poet that you're celebrating, Ghalib, he was an Urdu poet, right? Urdu pe sitam dhakar, after being treacherous and oppressing Urdu, why are you now celebrating this poet of Urdu? I must also point out that Ghalib himself did not like Urdu very much. He thought it was a base language, and the largest part of his kalam is actually Farsi. In fact, his Farsi kalam is full of philosophical exegesis. He addresses philosophies all the way from ancient Greece to golden age of Islam, and Mira and all those, and up until that day. So he says, Ghalib जिसे कहते हैं उर्दू का ही शायर था, उर्दू पे सितम ढाकर गालिब पे करम क्यों है? What is this? What is this hypocrisy? ये जश्न ये हंगामे दिलचस्प खिलौने हैं, कुछ लोगों की कोशिश है कुछ लोग बहल जाएं. ये जश्न, all this festival is just an interesting toy for the government. कुछ लोगों की कोशिश है, so those people, some people, is they're trying that some people behel jaye, let them be divert, that their attention be diverted away and let them enjoy this. जो वादाए फरदा पे अब टल नहीं सकते, मुमकिन है कुछ अरसा इस जश्न पे टल जाएं. So he says, see, all these वादाए फरदा पे अब टल नहीं सकते, all these political promises that they make in their campaigns, all these big promises that they make to win these elections, अब पर अब टल नहीं सकते. But now they've been in power over and over again, but they cannot now make any more excuses and go away, turn away from their promises. मुमकिन है कुछ अरसा इस जश्न पे टल जाएं. So they are thinking, maybe if we do this, we can divert the attention of many people away, both pro and con. They can fight among themselves. And the unfortunate part is, like we discussed in all the social issues in the previous films, Sahir's poems and the problems that he talks about recur over and over again in India. Even today, after 75 years of independence, our governments are still doing and engaging in the same thing, and the same problems have not been addressed, and there's always something that they can divert your attention to, especially when social media can be weaponized in the way that it is being weaponized in India. ये जश्न ये हंगामे दिलचस्प खिलौने हैं, कुछ लोगों की कोशिश है कुछ लोग बहल जाएं, जो वादे फरदा पर अब टल नहीं सकते, मुमकिन है कुछ अरसे इस जश्न पे टल जाए. ये जश्न मुबारक हो, ये जश्न मुबारक हो, पर ये भी सदाकत है. कर लो यार, जश्न तुम्हें मुबारक, do it, have fun, good luck. But the truth is also this, पर ये भी सदाकत है. हम लोग हकीकत के एहसास से आरी हैं, that we, with all this stuff, we have moved away from the truth. हकीकत के एहसास से आरी हैं. गांधी हो या गालिब हो, 100 years, 1969 was the 100th birth anniversary of Gandhi and the 100th death anniversary of Mirza Ghalib. ये जश्न मुबारक हो, पर ये भी सदाकत है. हम लोग हकीकत के एहसास से आरी हैं. गांधी हो कि गालिब हो, इंसाफ की नजरों में, in the eyes of justice, be it गांधी और गालिब, गांधी हो कि गालिब हो, इंसाफ की नजरों में हम दोनों के कातिल हैं और दोनों के पुजारी हैं. In the eyes of justice, in the blindfolded eyes of justice, be it Gandhi or be it Ghalib, we are worshippers of both and we are murderers of both. This is something to think about, especially in today's times, in more and more polarized world at both local and global scales. आशा है कि आपको ये नज़्म, इसकी प्रसंग और व्याख्या पसंद आई है. अगली दफ़ा एक और साहिर लुधियानवी की नज़्म लेकर मैं फिर हाजिर होऊंगा. थैंक यू, आदाब, नमस्कार, खुशामदीद.